Sometimes the ocean doesn't roar, it whispers. And in those whispers, it asks a question that only a few people in history have ever answered. What will you do? When the world around you disappears, no land, no boat, no voice calling your name. Just endless blue water, just silence, just you, and the realization that nobody is coming. Welcome to the story of a man who should have died 100 times, but somehow didn't. A man whose courage didn't just keep him alive, it redefined what human endurance really means. His name was Stephen Callahan, and this is how he survived 76 days lost alone in the Atlantic Ocean. But before the world knew him as the man who came back from the impossible, Stephen was simply a dreamer, a sailor, someone who believed that the sea wasn't an enemy but a companion. He had built his own boat, the Napoleon Solo, with his own hands. Every piece of wood, every bolt, every angle was a part of him. This boat wasn't just a vessel, it was the proof of a man chasing his purpose. In 1981, Stephen decided to do something most people only talk about. He set off on a solo journey across the Atlantic, the kind of dream that inspires some and terrifies others. But Stephen wasn't afraid. He trusted the sea. He trusted himself. The first days were calm. The wind was friendly. The ocean carried his boat like an old friend. Nights were filled with stars and days with quiet waves brushing against the hull. Stephen kept a journal, writing about small details, wind direction, sail tension, water temperature. He believed in preparation. He believed in understanding the sea. But dreams have a price, and sometimes the ocean tests those who dare to trust it. One night, as Stephen slept inside his small cabin, he was awakened by a sound no sailor ever wants to hear, a violent crash, followed by the groan of bending metal and cracking wood. In an instant, his world tilted. A sharp object. He didn't know if it was a whale, drifting debris, or something else had struck the hull with tremendous force. Water rushed in. His boat was dying. Imagine waking up and realizing your home is sinking beneath your feet. Imagine trying to think, breathe, and decide while every second counts. Panic is natural, but panic kills. Stephen knew that. So instead of breaking down, he fought back against the rising water. He climbed out, rain pounding his face, wind screaming like a warning. The sky had turned black, the sea churning violently. This wasn't a calm accident. It was a storm that didn't care if you lived or died. Stephen grabbed what he could flares, a little food, a navigation tool, a sleeping bag, some essential gear. Water was already up to his knees inside the cabin. He knew he had minutes, maybe seconds. With shaking hands, he deployed his tiny inflatable life raft, his final chance at survival. He climbed in, cutting himself in the process. Blood mixed with seawater. The raft rocked violently, like a leaf in a hurricane. Behind him, the Napoleon Solo, the boat he built, the dream he carried, continued sinking. He could do nothing but watch. Most people break at this moment. Most people question everything they ever believed. But Stephen knew something important. The sea destroys, but it also gives chances, tiny ones. And if you take those tiny chances seriously, you survive. The first night in the raft was chaos. Waves slammed against the rubber sides. Salt water sprayed in his eyes. He had no idea where he was drifting. No engine, no radio, no sails, just a flimsy raft and determination. By sunrise, everything had changed. The storm calmed, the sky brightened, but the ocean? It looked endless, infinite, terrifying. Stephen understood one thing instantly. He was truly alone. He checked his supplies. A small amount of water, a few rations, a survival manual, a spear gun, and a raft barely big enough to lie down in. He took a breath. If he wanted to live, he had to outthink the ocean itself. His first challenge was water. Without fresh water, he wouldn't last a week. The sun was getting hotter, the air drier. Stephen looked up at the clear sky. Clouds meant rain, but the sky refused to help. He touched the raft's rubber surface. Warm, sticky, thin. Too thin to trust, too thin to last long. But Stephen wasn't a man who waited for miracles. He was a man who created them. Using scraps from his emergency gear, he crafted a makeshift solar still, a device to collect condensation and turn salt water into something drinkable. It was slow, painfully slow. But each drop was a victory. Each drop was a reminder, you're alive. Keep going. At night, the ocean changed personality. No longer bright and forgiving, now mysterious and cold. Stephen listened to the waves, and for a moment, he felt something unexpected. Hope. Because hope doesn't always come from safety, sometimes it comes from refusing to surrender. He had no idea he was about to spend 76 days living on that fragile bubble of rubber. No idea how many storms he'd face, how many nights he'd cry, how many sharks would circle below him. No idea how many times the ocean would try to claim him. But he knew one thing already. He wasn't going to die without a fight. And as the first night faded into the second morning, Stephen Callahan braced himself because the real battle was only beginning. The second day began with a brutal reminder. Survival is not a movie, it's a war of small details. The ocean was calm, but the sun bore down like a punishment. Stephen's lips were already cracking. His hands burned from salt water. The raft smelled like rubber and despair. He knew dehydration would come first. Hunger comes later, but thirst kills fast. Stephen checked the solar still he'd built. A few droplets, barely enough to wet his tongue. But that drop was everything. That drop told him he could make more. It was a beginning. He studied the ocean around him. It stretched in every direction, shimmering in the harsh sunlight. At times it was beautiful, too beautiful, because beauty can make you forget that you're dying. Fish passed beneath the raft in flashes of silver and blue. Food. But catching them was another challenge. Stephen had a spear again, but using it on a raft that bounced like a balloon on the water was dangerous. One wrong move could puncture the raft, ending everything. Still, he tried. Hours passed. Splash. Miss. Splash, miss. Finally, after countless attempts, he struck a small mahi-mahi. The fish thrashed, its tail beating wildly. Stephen held on. He didn't celebrate. He simply whispered, "Thank you." Because when you're alone with the sea, gratitude becomes sacred. He ate slowly, chewing every bite like it was his last. That meal rebooted his body and his spirit. He could survive. He could fight. He just needed to last long enough for rescue. But rescue didn't come. Days passed. Then weeks. The raft drifted through unpredictable currents. Stephen used the stars at night to guess his location. He believed he was drifting west toward the Caribbean. He wasn't wrong. But the ocean wasn't done testing him. Around day 20, Stephen heard something beneath the raft. A sound like rough sandpaper sliding over rubber. Then he saw it. A fin. Then another. Then 4 more. Sharks. They circled him like the ocean's guardians, curious and hungry. Stephen froze. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched the dark shapes glide beneath him. One shark nudged the raft. Another scraped its rough skin against the underside, testing the texture. Stephen whispered to himself, "Not today, please. Not today." Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the sharks lost interest and drifted away. But Stephen understood the message. The ocean was alive, and it was watching. His raft had another problem, a slow leak. Every morning, he woke up halfway submerged. He had to pump air into it constantly, even when he was exhausted or dizzy from the heat. One mistake, one moment of giving up, and the raft would fold around him like a broken shell. He kept fighting. He wrote in his journal, If I die out here, at least let it be because I fought till the end. Around day 35, something unexpected happened. Stephen saw a ship, a giant tanker, moving fast, slicing through the waves. He stood and waved his arms. He screamed. He fired a flare. The ship didn't see him. It kept moving. Stephen felt something inside him crack. He sat back in the raft, water pooling around his legs, and cried for the first time since his boat sank. He wasn't ashamed. Tears were a release. Tears were human. But then, he wiped his face and whispered, "Not yet." He rebuilt his solar still, strengthened the raft's edges, organized his supplies. He forced himself to keep going. Because survival isn't one big miracle, it's a series of small decisions. One more day, one more hour, one more breath. Around day 45, storms returned. Violent ones. Waves taller than houses rose around him. Lightning ripped through the sky. The raft twisted, flipped, almost collapsed. Stephen held on, gripping the rope with raw, bleeding hands. Salt stung every cut. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't think. He could only endure. The storm lasted 2 nights. When it ended, Stephen was still alive, but barely. His skin was burned and peeling. His ribs stuck out. His beard was long and tangled. His voice was weak, but his eyes, still bright, still determined. Around day 60, birds began to appear. Not many. Just a few. But birds meant land wasn't impossibly far. Hope returned in tiny wings. The ocean brought more fish. Some days he caught enough to feast. Other days he caught nothing. Hunger became normal like breathing. His weight continued dropping. His clothes hung off him. His bones stood out like sharp shadows under his skin. But still, he survived. Finally, on day 76, just when the body begins to fail, Stephen saw something. A fishing boat. Small, wooden, painted in bright colors. He blinked twice, believing it was a hallucination. But the boat was real, and the men inside saw him. They shouted. They pointed. They waved wildly. Stephen tried to stand but collapsed. The fishermen pulled him aboard. He had survived 76 days in a life raft alone against every rule of nature. Stephen Callahan had done the impossible. When Stephen's feet touched solid ground, he wasn't the same man who had left on his dream voyage. His body was weak, nearly skeletal, but his spirit, stronger than ever. Doctors later said it was a miracle he was alive, but Stephen knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was mindset, a stubborn, relentless refusal to surrender. In interviews, Stephen often said something simple yet powerful. The ocean didn't save me, but it taught me how to save myself. And that is the heart of his story, not the storms, not the sharks, not the loneliness. It's the message hidden inside the struggle. Human beings are capable of surviving far more than they believe. Stephen wasn't superhuman. He wasn't a trained survival expert when everything collapsed. He was just a man with a dream who refused to let the ocean take it away. His journey is a reminder to all of us. When life sinks your ship, when everything you built collapses, when you feel lost, alone, drifting without direction, you have 2 choices: give up or start fighting one breath at a time. Stephen chose to fight, even when the raft leaked, even when sharks circled, even when ships ignored him, even when storms tried to finish what the ocean had started. Every day he made a decision. I will survive today. Tomorrow can worry about itself, and maybe that is the biggest lesson of all. You don't conquer life by defeating everything at once. You conquer life by refusing to quit again and again and again. When people asked Stephen what the worst part of the ordeal was, the hunger, the thirst, the fear, he always said one thing: the hardest battle was the battle inside my own mind. Because when you're alone for 76 days, your thoughts become louder than the waves. Doubt whispers. Fear grows teeth. Hope flickers like a candle in the wind, but Stephen kept that candle alive. He talked to himself. He wrote in his journal. He reminded himself that the world still existed, that people still cared, even if he couldn't see them. And that inner belief carried him all the way home. His story became legendary. Schools teach it. Survival experts study it. His book, Adrift, inspired millions. But maybe the real reason his story stays alive is because it is not just a story about the sea, it is a story about the human soul. So as this documentary comes to an end, remember this: life will throw storms at you. Life will try to sink your boat. Life will test you when you least expect it. But the raft that saves you, the one thing that keeps you alive, is already inside you: your courage, your resilience, your determination. Stephen Callahan survived 76 days lost at sea. What you're facing today may feel impossible, but so did his battle. And yet, he made it. If his story teaches us anything, it's this: ***, never underestimate your own strength. Never underestimate the tiny decisions that keep you moving. And never ever give up on yourself. ***, if you learned something today, if Stephen's journey inspired you, if this story reminded you of the power you carry inside, then make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs courage today, because stories like this don't just entertain. They remind us what it means to be human. And somewhere out there, someone may need this reminder more than you know. Thank you for watching. And until next time, stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep moving forward, no matter how rough the seas become.